This is a continuation of the highlights stream of the Crazyhouse Candidates 2021 that we were doing. It was broken up to watch the match between Opperwezen and Blitz Bullet. I just want to show you just one of those games from that match which we've just seen, because Opperwezen found a very beautiful mate in that game. Play through the game fairly quickly, so the interest is much more in the mate. So double pressure on F5, takes, E6. So we saw this sort of idea in the finishers games, which we're actually going to get back to against Kleerkast. So Blitz Bullet just providing space on D8 for the king to run. And the knight comes in, pawn check. Obviously, if king takes pawn, what's coming next? Pawn there, check. If king takes pawn, at some point knight there, check, but maybe queen takes bishop as well. Not sure which order. Apparently queen takes bishop first is good, but I'm not quite sure why. If bishop here, then the problem is queen takes bishop, and they're sort of ideas. Queen takes bishop, pawn takes. Oh, bishop at e8, stopping the king. That's a problem. Pawn at d7. Okay, and promote knight, and you don't want to lose a queen, so you keep running with this king. And then bishop at c5, covering this square. And what if you ran to a7 directly? Then there's knight c6. Okay, I'm going way too deep, but knight c5, and then he steps up, and then a5, just drawing this king up the board. And I want to cover this square, so knight a3, checkmate. Okay, so that was if he runs up, then here check, and then just pawn here looks like it's mate. Oh yeah, it's not mate because there's a queen, but then that's very easy to mate. Queen here will mate because of the power of the diagonals. Anyway, so these are the kind of ideas. That's why. So he avoids it. He gets the knight, picks up the queen with check, picks up this. Queen gets hit. Queen gets hit. Takes here. Takes here. Takes here. Takes a knight, and then we have this beautiful knight takes rook, takes here. Okay, now this is the position. Okay. And suddenly the game has got very sharp. Knight takes rook, pawn takes bishop, and suddenly white has to find the correct move. So if he doesn't find the correct move, actually black is the one who's mating. So this is the position, white to play and win, and Opper did indeed find the mate. So we've got 2 pawns and a rook, and now we've got a 3rd pawn, so 3 pawns and a rook. So queen takes pawn, check. If the king goes into the corner, rook here is checkmate. If the king goes here, queen takes pawn is checkmate. So you have to take the queen. Rook here, check. If the king just steps back, it's very easy. Just pawn here, check, and knight takes b6. But king a8. Now if you go knight takes b6, the king runs here and is now hitting this rook. So it's very important to get this sequence correct. 1 pawn, 2 pawns, promote with the check, king takes rook is forced, because if you block, then rook takes is checkmate. 3rd pawn, our final pawn, and that forces the king to a8. So this whole sequence of 3 pawns is just to force the king to the b8 square. So check, check, and he's forced to the b8 square. So very pretty. And then we have the checkmate with the knight and pawn. So that's a really beautiful little puzzle position that Opper won. Could it have been smoother somehow? I'm not sure. But it was very pretty. Knight takes queen. Queen takes f3 is correct. So apparently here, queen takes d5 is interesting. Because, so how does this work? So obviously that looks like it's going to be a bad idea because of pawn at c6 and maybe bishop at e. No, not that way. So pawn at c6, you have to take it or queen's landing. So you take it. How do we finish this? Oh, apparently it's a queen here, bishop here, I think. Queen here, bishop here might do it. Because if he goes here, pawn here, a couple of diagonals will mate. So if he goes this way, yeah, we've got three diagonals in hand, so we have enough to put a bishop here, a bishop here, and a pawn here, say. And if he goes the other way, then same kind of thing will work, because the rook is cutting off this line here. So bishop here, check. If he goes this way, it's easy, just diagonal, diagonal. And if he comes here, then I need to think a second, because I want to keep this file open. So bishop at c8 is the move apparently, deflecting and then take. Or if you block, similar idea. If you block, queen takes. So that's not so easy to see. But okay, so that would have been another way of playing this. So that's why pawn takes doesn't work. So why not rook takes? So rook takes, I wonder if, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Bishop at c8. Bishop at c8, if you don't take it, we get a queen landing on b7. But if you do take it, then pawn at d7, and the idea is if you take here, then we can put a quick, my connection is lagging somewhat. We have here check, say bishop at b8, pawn at b7 check, king here. I have some lag issues, but the point is just simply go queen takes bishop and queen takes c8 checkmate. So that's very pretty. So you can't take with the rook. What else could you do? If you take with the pawn, sorry, if you take with the king rather, how do we finish this one off? So you could go queen here, that drives the king up to here or here. Notice this is always cut off. How to finish it? So king here, we can go knight here, check. King here, yeah, let's just play it out. So queen here, check. King here, queen takes pawn, check. And that cuts him off. So if he defends, then a bishop will be enough to mate. Bishop here will be checkmate. So that's very nice. And of course, if he goes straight up, then it's the same sequence, but with this one first, then this. And now we have another finish, I thought. Oh no, we don't, because the rook covers. So we just do the same thing. Okay, so that would have been another way of getting mate, of finishing this game off. Queen takes bishop. But what we had instead was a very pretty one. So thankfully we had this, just a very beautiful mate. Queen takes b6. 1 pawn, 2 pawns, 3 pawns, and checkmate. Very pretty. Okay, so we're going to go back to the second half of the match between Kleerkast and TheFinnisher. So we in the first part of this stream, which was before the match Opera Blitz Bullet streamed by Kleerkast just now, we looked at the first 5 games of Kleerkast TheFinnisher. We also looked at 264 Brock against Marioton. So now let's look at the end of the Kleerkast TheFinnisher match, which nobody streamed, and also the doganswer Blitz Bullet match. Okay. So game 6, Kleerkast the finisher. So at the current point, we're looking from the Kleerkast for some real masterclasses from the finisher. And Kleerkast is going for his usual d4 and fianchetto setup. And maybe it's very instructive to see what the finisher plays against this setup, with this knights on f5 and c6 putting pressure on d4. It's a good setup. Bishop e3. Maybe an idea in this position is knight g5, something I discovered. And I don't think anyone's ever played this before. And the idea is you allow this pawn to be taken, and you sack on f7. And then you sack your queen, and you win this bishop. So that's the idea. And I think king takes f7 would be a bit of a mistake, because then you go hunting for another knight. And obviously, a knight is, if you could take this knight, then suddenly knight at c6 becomes a dangerous idea. So this is an interesting position because the white king stays quite safe. We give up the queen, but we get quite a lot of compensation. We get a piece back for it. And black's king is quite underdeveloped and quite insecure. So knight g5, interesting try for white in this position. But it's never been played. So instead, bishop e3. Knight takes e3, takes, and bishop here. Quite uncomfortable. How to defend e3. Queen c1 is logical. Although the problem with it is takes, takes, and takes. And white is basically quite tied down. Knight here, well, takes, takes, and takes. How come it doesn't get played? You can just take straight away, but this also looks strong. Yeah, knight takes d4 is strong. So why is it strong? Because if takes, takes, rook takes, this is a weak square on e3. And h4 is also a really strong move. The idea is simply to take, and yeah, g3 is a weakness. And if you take on h4, obviously the queen. Hang on. So if you take on h4, yeah, the queen could come in, and if you repeat, bishop takes g3 is possible. So you don't want to take on h4. So it takes on h4, then there's also just bishop takes h2 first, and then queen takes h4. It's probably even stronger. So okay, bishop takes h2. So this is looking dangerous. Probably just straight away lost. Blocks. Does queen? Bishop comes here. This should be mate straight away. Actually, just pawn at g3 and queen at h2. Yeah. So that's a very bad idea. Okay. So actually, after bishop takes h2, you'd have to sidestep somehow. But okay, so that would be very bad. So this is actually, yeah. So knight takes d4 straight away is strong, because after takes, 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 not sure you have time to take back. But if you don't have time, yeah, there's a lot of problems for white. But okay, this also looks good. Knight g4, knight takes g3, h takes g3, bishop takes g3. So white's king side is wrecked. Bishop at f6, good try to try and destabilize black's king a bit, create some weaknesses. So if g takes f6, you just take the bishop on h6, of course. So TheFinnisher actually played queen takes f6, good move to stop any of that nonsense. Knight takes queen, pawn takes. Kleerkast going all in, takes, 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 but is his king safe? King h1 is good move. King h1 keeps white in the game, so if you go this way, takes, king takes, knight at g4, that black has too much material. So this square and this square are covered, but it just looks very dangerous. Can't say exactly what the finish is, but apparently one idea is rook at d1 and then takes here and pick up the queen. So picking up the queen and a pawn for a rook and a knight. That's one idea among others. So king h1 is very good from the finisher, and castles. Was there anything else the black could have done? Knight at f5 directly, but maybe, who knows. So castles, now white gets a knight on f5, so maybe black putting a knight on f5 first before castling was possibly slightly stronger. At g7, takes, pawn here. Got to stop the mate on h8, just simply queen at h8 mate. And there's no cookie crumbing possible just yet. Takes a knight, defends. So it looks like a sharp game here. But a good attack from white. But maybe knight at g4 was more powerful than knight at g8. So knight at g4 takes, king takes, at g5 takes, knight here, steps back. Yeah, the problem here is if knight takes bishop, queen here, steps back, knight takes knight. So it's all over. And that's exactly what happened. So where did it all go wrong? It seems to have gone wrong around knight at g8. Knight at g4 takes, king takes. So what happened in the game was knight at g4 takes, king takes, pawn here. So what's the difference between here, knight here takes, pawn here, f takes. Not sure what's the difference between the knight on g8? Take. Oh, of course, yes. So if you put your black knight here, it means your white knight can't come here. So very subtle little difference. That's very nice. So if instead of knight at g8 you put your knight here, that means that square is not available for the white knight. And of course the white knight can't come on g8 either. So the black king is actually a lot safer, and black's actually winning this position. Interesting. Okay, so as we saw in the game, this happened. The knight landed, and this is checkmate. So that was game 6, and the finisher took a 5-1 lead after 6 games. So game 7, the finisher goes for e4, and we saw this opening from the finisher with delaying moving the knight, just bringing the bishop out, pushing the pawns. And the reason is he wants to win this knight for a pawn, so there's no trade of knights available. And usually it's best just to leave that knight there in these sorts of positions. But Kleerkast tried that 2 games ago and it didn't work out well, so this time he tries something different with this. So he gives up the knight for a pawn, but the problem with this position is the d5 pawn is weak. Okay, so just checking, is my sound okay? Yeah, it seems to be. So not getting much feedback just yet. So queen came out with check, bishop comes out to defend the pawn. And interestingly, the best move for white here is actually knight at b4, hitting both the knight and this central pawn. But knight here, this is also a very thematic idea. So the point is, it's very difficult to defend both. Pawn at d7, then you take on b7. The only thing about this is the knight on b7 doesn't really have any future in this position. Takes. White, it seems, doesn't want a queen trade. Pawn at f2. So black's doing okay here, it seems. Not clear. Pawn f2, takes. Queen here, check. Queen takes knight, looks natural. Apparently d4 is also very interesting. The idea of winning a knight. And this looks all very threatening with knight takes d6 and losing a rook, but actually black is actually very safe. Lose a queen. I mean, this is sort of a crazy old line. But black would be doing fine. So in this position, rook takes c8 isn't another idea. You just defend. and the king can run, and it's secure. It's very important not to defend with a rook. That's the one thing, because if you defend with the rook, then you're getting mated. So that's the one thing to be careful of in that position. But okay, so what I'm saying here is that, yeah, d4 is very interesting, but queen takes knight looks like it wins material. So the reason why d4 is so powerful is you're trying to disturb this knight so you can take the bishop with check. That's the idea. And you can always take the knight later because it doesn't have much of a future. So d4 was the move missed in this position. Queen takes b7. Here, knight here. So he's trying to just get his king safe. Bishop f6. Now notice here, with this bishop taken, whichever way you take it, it's opening up a diagonal on the king. So it's slightly uncomfortable for black. So it takes here, so their idea is bishop at h5, and you don't have a good blocker for g6. You might have to go push g6, but then that creates weakness on g7, h6. But okay, this happened instead. Probably this is interesting. Castle's kingside. But okay, what happened here is castles immediately, and the problem with this is takes, and knight here, and there are not many pieces around black's king. That's the basic issue here. So bishop takes g5, knight here, bishop b6, and just no real good defense. So white is winning because there is no mate here. So the bishop is defending. King can go wherever, and there isn't a mate. As long as you don't step back here, or step to f3, where queen f2 would be dangerous, there is no mate. The king can run, as long as you don't step into the corner. So king here is fine, and the point is the king is finding shelter. On h3, that works. Also king running this way is also, it's fine because the bishop's covering. So there's no knight. There's no knight to e3 as there would be sometimes. Queen a7 trying to defend. Very hard to defend. Bishop attacking the queen. Some good moves. And white just picking up a lot of material. Bishop takes c7. So it's just a question of when. There was a quicker mate here with rook at c8. Knight here, check. Queen here, rook here, checkmate. So using a magnet mate idea. But instead, this is also going to mate eventually. The king is just running a bit further, but that's a discovery from the rook, and the finisher gets the mate. So that's game 7, and at this point he's 6-1 up. Let's quickly go to game 8. Kleerkast plays d4 again, fianchetto system, and the finisher mixes it up. He doesn't play the usual 97 to f5 as he was in previous ones. He's going for this queen takes h3 sack, which is very powerful, so you have to defend against it. Queen f5, and he's playing here a system which we saw, queen f5 to h5. We saw this in the series between Mariota and Cabbage, in one of those games, this idea. It's a very simple idea of just putting the queen on h5, and then this attack is very strong. I think Cabbage tried this against Mariota. Knight h4, queen h5, knight takes d5. Knight takes d5, and it looks like this queen is trapped. Doesn't have any good squares to go to. But it turns out it's not much of a problem. You can actually give away the queen for a pawn. Now this is just a fabulous idea. Queen takes g4, this idea from the finisher. I mean, has it ever been played before? It's only been played once before. But it's the strongest move in the position, and it's an incredible move. So what's the idea? So you give away your queen for a pawn, and then you don't even take a second pawn. You go knight f6. And the point is, white doesn't have good pieces to defend that pawn with. I mean, if you go bishop h3, then bishop takes g4 comes, and then takes h3. f3 might be a try, and f3 is in fact what happened in the game. But still, you just take this pawn. It's very uncomfortable because you'll have knight takes bishop and another knight landing on f2, potentially picking up the queen. So e4. What else could we do? e4, bishop drops back. So is that a threat? I'm not sure. There's actually a stronger move here from black, which was missed, which is at h3 directly. And if you try and take the bishop, you don't go even knight. Okay, you can't go knight takes. Yeah, so this is the point of. Sorry, that was the point of d4. The point of d4 is now the queen is protecting this g4 square. We just now h3 is a brilliant move. So even if you take here, we take here, and king takes at e2. The idea being after queen takes, knight takes d4. So this was a very nice idea. And the queen wants to stay guarding this, but it can't really, because if it steps back, a pawn lands here, and if it doesn't step back, then this is landing. And the knight's protected. So white's position is just crumbling. It's a very beautiful idea. So h3 was missed, bishop dropped back, e5, knight h5, bishop e3. So black, the finisher, doing really nicely in this position. This could have been played. Knight takes g3 could have been played, but instead the finisher plays quite passively with at h6, sort of super defensive, trying to make sure it wasn't. Yeah, so he could have just gone in like knight takes g3, king takes g3, and just gone straight in for the attack. So at f4 check, bishop takes, knight here check, takes on f4, and so on. So it could have been played a little bit more aggressively, but he plays it quite passively, and this is also good for black. And this is just crushing. Picks up the queen with check, and it's all going to be over very soon. And so it was. Sorry, actually, at g3, already at this point, white resigned because the writing was on the wall. Okay, so at this point, after 8 games, it was 7-1. Is that right? Something wrong. I have miscounted something. So, sorry, Kleerkast won the first game, then it was 1-all, 2-1, 3-1, 4-1. Oh, Kleerkast lost the game. Huh. Oh, this was Kleerkast's victory in game 6. Okay, sorry, my bad. So Kleerkast won game 6 with this. I'm sorry about this. This is this nice attack. So the finisher going knight at g8 instead of knight at g4. That was a Kleerkast finding a very nice mate against the finisher. So it was actually 4-2 at that stage. 5-2, 6-2, and we're now going into game 9. Okay, so queen d3, bishop f5. What else to do in this position? So possibly another idea is just reinforce the center. But bishop f5, d5. So this is a really strong move from the finisher. And e6. So this is just this is a complete crush from the finisher, hitting on the f7 square. Takes the knight, takes here, knight here, check. Oof, the king is stuck. Knight takes knight, knight here. King is forced to step back, and wherever you go, it's mated. So, or if not mated, well, queen takes bishop is coming is the problem. So he steps up to try it, but queen takes bishop is checkmate then. So ruthless game from the finisher to take it to 7-1. Sorry, 7-2, going into the final game. And the final game was a mainline e4, e5 game. e4, e5, bishop e7 line, bishop e3, queen e8, king goes to the corner. So just to say, what's the absolute main line is not king h1. It's the more usually played is bishop takes d4, and I'm not sure exactly, but something like this. So knight here is sort of tricky move. You want queen at h8 mate, but if you take here, the idea is queen takes bishop and the knight can't take back. Well, this is mate. And so knight h7 is an idea, but then queen h4 is quite a neat idea. So you can't take the knight because queen at h8 would be mate. But how else to defend? Yeah. So what you should not do in this position is go knight takes knight, because then you lose your queen, and then you have to be very careful because there's knight here check, queen here, and smother after rook takes. Knight here check, queen here, rook takes. And this, you have to defend this square. Maybe you do this, and this is going to be mated as well. Because however you take this, it's checkmate, queen here or knight here. So that would be how not to play it. Oh, so it's not direct. It's king takes knight. But okay, so it's just you're going to get mated in this line. Anyway, so this is just some. The point is, so bishop takes d4 is the point. Is some more main line. King h1 might be some newer theory. Bishop g4, f3, bishop d7, queen d2, knight h5, sacks on h7. So the point of sacking on h7 is just to weaken up these light squares. g4, maybe f5 is also an interesting idea, just to block off this diagonal, get in on g6. But g4, it's the same sort of ideas eventually. Was there an opportunity missed here? Yeah, there was an opportunity missed here. Knight takes f3. Knight takes f3 was missed. The point is if you take this and you take this. And obviously, if you take the knight, then you're losing your queen. That could be risky with your king so open. So knight takes f3 was missed. Knight f6 came instead. g5, c6 looks a bit slow. Maybe the knight just can go back to h5 here. That would be fine. f4 came. So this is interesting. That's also interesting. But okay, f4 came. Knight g4, so that the knight has a space to go. So rook takes knight. Yeah, instead of rook takes knight, queen g2 is an idea. So you're hitting both knights with this move. But rook takes knight and then queen g2. But then there's knight takes bishop. So if we do queen g2 straight away, and then knight takes bishop, knight takes knight, and then you're still hitting this. But okay, it's not clear what's just another way of playing it. So you gave away rook for a knight first, and then did this. Oof, so it's a very sharp line. Knight at g6 first, and then taking the queen apparently is even stronger, because if he takes back, then you're winning a lot of material, and this knight is protecting your own king. But okay, he took the queen first, and the problem with that is now black has bishop takes, and now the g6 square is protected. So you must go knight here first and then take. So a slight mistake here from white, from Kleerkast. And that's exactly what the finisher did. Bishop takes, and now it's a tough position. And probably he's probably, yeah. In this position, actually, the finisher had an even quicker finish. with queen at g3. It's a really beautiful move. Instead of knight g to h4. Instead of knight g to h4, queen at g3. And the idea is if you take it, obviously, then you have the Arabian mate, so you can't take it. So we have to somehow defend this h2 square. So or we have to counterattack. But we can't defend the h2 square with a knight, because rook here is checkmate. And we can't defend with a knight here, because that's less obvious. That's less obvious. I mean, maybe something like rook at h3. Goes bishop at g1. Yeah, it's hard to see the exact sequence. Knight g to e1, threatening a pawn here, checkmate. Yeah, so the other way would be to attack, but then takes, and now we have mate. With knight at f2, bishop here, rook here, and pawn here, checkmate. So queen at g3 was a really beautiful move there for the finisher. But okay, he did this, which is also crushing. Queen at h6, takes, pawn here, knight here. Oops, the bishop was guarding all along. So the real mistake in this game was not checking first and then taking the queen. Because here that bishop could come back and stop knight at g6 coming. So that was the final game, and it finished 8-2 to the finisher. Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a second, and then we're going to look at the match between Blitz Bullet and Doganswer. Okay, so Blitz Bullet was white, so we'll look from Blitz Bullet's perspective. And Blitz Bullet is again playing this fianchetto system, but with c4 takes, knight takes, interesting. So what's the idea of c4? Because if you go knight takes now, this pawn is no longer defended. But if you go pawn takes, the problem was then this pawn falls. So this did come indeed, and he pushes d5. Takes, takes. So he gets a pawn, but black gets 2 pawns. Oh, and then he gets his pawn back. Gets his pawn back, but loses some tempi. If knight at c5, maybe step back to d1. But yeah, castles at g5. This is a really nice move at g5. And probably what the best thing for black to do is just to take it and replace a pawn on h6. You can't really ignore these pawns because otherwise you're taking again. And unfortunately, I think he just ignored it. The Doganswer ignored this, and this now means when you take back, and white's getting a big attack. And black goes for a counter-attack, so if rook takes knight, bishop takes g3, these sorts of ideas. But the attack on the black king is too dangerous. So if he goes to h8, takes g7, so he takes, might as well take it. Takes, gives up the queen, because if he doesn't give up the queen, then we've got like a bishop landing on h7, another pawn takes pawn. So if suppose, for example, you go to g8, you're actually getting mated here, because bishop h7, king takes h8, takes, and at h6, and if you step back here at g7, so you basically have to take it. And then the move. Well, normally in these sorts of positions you look at moves like this, but then the king would just take this bishop, so that doesn't quite work. But knight f5 is nice because it stops the king from running back, and g4 at g4 is checkmate. So that's the threat. So that's why you can't step up either, because bishop to h7, and this rook is cutting the king off, so h6, knight f5, still a problem, g4. So this knight's not doing a good job protecting the king, because everything's cut off. So that's why he gives up the queen. Side steps, and yeah, losing the queen, this is going to be tough to defend. And black just resigned. He's just trying to pick this knight off next. So here it just takes, and knight f6 would be the idea. If you take, it's a simple mate. If you step up, it's also a simple mate. If you move the king anywhere, queen at h7 is going to be mate. So that was game 1, Blitz Bullet against doganswer. Okay, game 2. So both playing fianchetto setups. So he takes the knight and puts the knight on h3. So the weakness was left on h3, and if you ignore it, then knight takes bishop will be annoying, because you have pawns left on f2 and f4. So you kind of have to pay attention to that. But if you take it, then you get a bishop on h3, and you don't have a pawn to fix g2. So it's a bit of a dilemma. He doesn't want to take that knight, so he decides to take black's bishop. Knight takes bishop, knight takes bishop. Except black moved first, so surely black should have something. He tries for this. But actually it's sort of slightly backfired, because the bishop gets attacked, and it's quite, if it's moved, then yeah, tries to defend his bishop, but takes, the queen is running into trouble defending a knight, which is basically stuck, so it's a bit uncomfortable. So maybe dropping the bishop there was not the right thing to do. Maybe bishop h6 was better, or maybe just taking the knight directly was better. Hard to say. But black gets into a bit of trouble here. Knight here, takes, sidesteps, and white's looking quite safe. So he just develops. His queen is looking very silly. Takes. Well, this trade doesn't benefit white too much, but also not clear what else he could have done, because the threat is takes. So takes. Okay, so it's very uncomfortable for black, but as both sides got into time pressure, let's see what happened. Bishop hitting g2, takes the queen. So white's still doing well, white's still solid as well, but somehow black's able to consolidate because of the lack of maybe a slight lack of aggression. Bishop at h6, why can't we just take it? Because at g7 would be a problem. Why can't we just take it? Because then knight at h5 would be a problem. So just needed something with a bit more aggression from white, so instead he's playing very defensive, and suddenly black fixes a lot of his weaknesses, and suddenly it's white who's looking a little bit uncomfortable. Difficult to say. Maybe knight at g3 was interesting, and then queen takes bishop. But okay, he takes the rook, takes the bishop. This is all struggles in time pressure. Takes, hits the queen. Queen takes c6, maybe it's too much. Queen takes f4 probably. Keeps white in the game. Queen takes c6 gives away a little bit too much. Just trying to deflect this bishop so he gets the knight on f7 is the idea, but he takes it with check is the problem. So a real battle of attrition here. f3. Okay, it's a mate threat with this, but that's a bad idea because black has mate now. In fact, white resigned on move 73 after king takes g2. White realized that he was done for. Okay, so it was a long game, but Blitz Bullet eventually prevailed. Game 3, we again have the sphere and chateau setup. c4, losing a pawn. Knight e5, losing another pawn. Losing another pawn, and yet white is doing very well because he has b7 pawn whenever he wants it, and black takes, and then takes c6. Yeah, takes a piece here, sacks another piece here. I mean, this is amazing, amazing queen sack. Takes this rook. So yeah, it was a really impressive game from Blitz Bullet, just taking everything. So now we're hitting all these dark squares, e7, g7, and in the meantime staying safe, staying very safe, and just really crushing game from Blitz Bullet. So 3 love now. Game 4. So both the TheFinnisher chatter setup, and we're seeing this famed knight g8, h6. So this is a nice move here, hitting both this and this. Queen goes back to defend one, can't defend the other also. And likewise, this knight hitting the bishop, also hitting here. But this is fine. It opens up a rook file. Takes, could just take back. Bishop here, here. Okay, so knight here, takes, knight here, nice move. Bishop g7 to come back and defend. Staring at the queen. Blitz Bullet not afraid of discoveries. How come? He's not afraid. So what's the idea? If this, then e2 becomes an issue. So yeah, he wants knight takes e2, takes queen. And is there a way of defending this? Just rook takes bishop, bishop takes g4, and create a weakness on h3, I guess. Knight at h3, knight at h3, and what's the finish? Maybe just knight takes f2 is an idea. So okay, So okay, so he does this with now other discovery ideas. If you take the rook, takes here and picks up the queen. So e4 comes, takes, takes the rook. He's going to take the queen here, looking at f7 as well as the knight. Why not simply take it? It looks like a free pawn. The idea is rook at e1, takes, and pawn here, trapping the rook. If this, you take the rook first before taking the other rook. So it's very uncomfortable. So the king ran, and again, it's the classic idea of attacking a king by attacking the pawn diagonal to the king. So if you take, we drop another pawn. If we take, we drop another pawn here, and then takes, and then go bishop here, and then takes, and where's the finish? Pawn here, and takes, and bishop here, and takes, and of course if you go here it's just mate, so you have to take it again, and now e5, and if you go here then queen and rook is mate, so you have to come here. Oh, you can't come here. Okay, so that's it then. Oh, it's queen and rook would be mate, but he actually has this, so only at f4 is slightly stronger. So if he comes here, okay, so here just gets mated in 1 by queen here. So probably the most resistant is this, queen at g3, king here, and rook here is checkmate. So that's the idea of the move. Just draw the king out and then drop your pieces. So you have to defend, but now you attack the defending piece. It's just ruthless. There's no defense. Takes, and now you get it. Drop, and queen here is checkmate. Okay, so really stunning play here from Blitz Bullet, taking a 4-love lead against doganswer. And we're going to see another fianchetto system. It's been working, so keep on using it. Takes, give up the pawn, push, takes. Gets both pawns back. And again, this brilliant move at g5, which I really like. And at h6 comes, but he draws the queen out, and he's now going to hit it with tempo. He's not afraid to give up the queen, and what's the purpose of giving up the queen? For a knight? Yeah, what is the purpose? So there's a much nicer move you could have played here, which is very simply at f6. And it's very hard to see what to do, because if you take the pawn, knight takes h6. So simple move. But okay, this is more complicated. And doganswer finds the right move here, which is he sacks the queen, relieving the pressure on f6. But having said that, white is now very safe with the setup. This pawn, bishop, everything, all the squares around the king are pretty safe. At g6, maybe this was an idea. At g6, this, well, it's not clear. So at g6 was played, takes, rook takes, at e6, rook e7, at f7. Yeah, you don't. This is also interesting. Knight takes e7, bishop takes, at f7. Now we've got a rook for the back rank. Rook at g8, threatening queen at h8. That would have been another way of proceeding. But okay, he went f7 first, grabbed a bishop, put the queen on. The king is not safe on h7 because the bishop takes g6. Knight h4, bishop at e4, bishop takes e4, knight at f6, and at this point, black saw the writing on the wall because you can take it once, but it steps back, and that's checkmate. Or even this is checkmate. So very pretty. Either 2 knights or knight and rook Arabian mate. So that's 5 love for Blitz Bullet at the halfway stage. So keeps on repeating what's working well, but doganswer is trying to switch things up a bit, which makes sense. Gets his knight on f4. And sacks the pawn for 2 pieces. Okay, so he doesn't push h6, instead he uses bishop on h6. At c5. So what's the idea? The idea is if you take this pawn, he wants to push here. So it's a pretty neat idea. And if ever you take the bishop, you'll take back with the knight, so you're keeping an eye on this pawn. Actually, you don't need to, because the queen's already there. So pretty neat idea. Knight takes h6 did come. Knight c takes d5 to hit h6. And then I don't know what this was. Maybe was it a mouse slip or what? White gives up the queen, and it just doesn't work because you might think maybe this, but then black has this. There's nothing. The knight's still defending g7 even. So I can only assume it's some kind of mouse slip. G7 comes, takes, knight takes. Black is very safe. Black is safe, but that's a very passive defense. I said here passive defense, but good enough. Knight at f5 is a more active defense. And just trying to go in, that would have been a more active way of going through. Knight f5, so you're both defending and you're looking at e3, and if takes, you're dropping a queen here, which is a great defense because then you're picking up that bishop, which is white's best piece. So that would have been a more accurate way of defending. Knight g8 though seems to work. Okay, it seems ridiculous, but black is still extremely safe. Everything's defended. And now he's threatening mate on h1. Takes on g3, check. Obviously he doesn't want to take it because his bishop takes ideas. Discover check ideas. If bishop takes knight, there's knight takes or rook takes with discoveries. Probably knight takes is even better. At g2, king g1, and at h2, that's simple enough. The knight covering f2. So the king just steps back, but then rook takes bishop, and it's all over. Rook takes pawn, rook takes bishop, rook here check, rook here check. It's checkmate. So what was the mistake? Bishop at e4. Oh, that was the mistake. The bishop on e4 was hanging. It's no defense because rook takes g2 and at f2, rook takes f2. That it actually relieves the pressure on black. And black is still winning. So apparently it takes pawn here, threatening rook here, checkmate. It's just very hard to stop. There's no defense basically. So knight here, rook h1 anyway. Bishop takes bishop is mate, so that's the problem. So impossible to defend. But okay, what happened in the game was check, check, and checkmate, which is very pretty. That's kind of, yeah, it's kind of neat how this is a nice sort of deflection idea. Check, 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 checkmate. Very pretty. So, 6 love. Pressure on the pin. But if a player is playing knight at b8, then that's clearly he's already losing. Goes for the sack. Yeah, somehow. Is there anything more forcing? Because somehow black's from having a terrible position, at least he's able to develop the stupid knight on b8 after this sack. So probably the thing to do in this position is to play it a little bit slower. Having said that, Stockfish suggests something crazy, which is if rook takes, pawn here. So what the heck is this? And if pawn takes, then pawn here. I don't entirely get it, but if you take again, then it wants to do this, and the point is, oh wow, oh wow. So that's very impressive. So really, the whole point of this is just to get a pawn for g6. And also potentially to open up g7 takes e6, because there's no bishop guarding e6. Stunning ideas. But okay, he goes for a more direct route. And this should apparently also be reasonable for white. Takes, g2, takes. Yeah, so white's doing well here, but has to defend accurately. And simply goes knight here, going for the mate. Now the move here is actually knight g4. That's the move you need, because you want to deflect this defender of queen h7, and the way to do it is with a knight on g4. So you're threatening knight takes knight with check and queen at h7 mate. So knight g4 is just a killer move. Knight f7 is interesting, going for this thing. Mate here on h8, but rook takes knight is a defense, and black survives a few moves longer. Sorry, just to say here, knight takes c6. That's a really beautiful knight. So e4 apparently is interesting. And if knight takes pawn, you get to go rook at g8. Takes. And you can have queen, but yeah. Rook here check, queen here check, and picking up a bishop. So the point is that if the knight takes, then you're no longer protecting this square, but if the bishop takes, then yeah, it's looking. Rook takes knight is coming, and then bishop at g8 coming next. So this is a very powerful move here, e4. But instead took this bishop and then did e4. Takes. Oh, took here first. Knight at f4. Bishop takes, knight takes, and all the while white's doing really well, but just makes one mistake, and that's going to h1. And the reason that's a mistake is because this comes. Bishop at g2, picks up a rook, puts the rook in the corner, picks up the queen with check, and queen here's checkmate. Soon. Bishop here's checkmate. Just one tiny little mistake. And if the king just goes back to g1, then there's nothing. And only if knight h3, if knight h3, then king h1, try to figure this one out. Yeah, then you're okay. There's no mate. So here, the problem is, we're picking up the queen with check. That's the problem. So just a bad mistake. One bad mistake. King g1 is completely winning, and everything else is completely losing. So white to play a defensive puzzle. And unfortunately for Blitz Bullet, he chose the wrong one. You've got to be careful here. If you can't go here, because always takes queen, get a knight with check. You can't step up, because always this knight comes in. And then that's really bad, because then you're forced to f2. So really, g1 is the only square, and then this one, there's a very pretty mate that doganswer found. So, and the knight comes in, and the bishop delivers mate. Okay, so that was game 7. So 6-1 to Blitz Bullet at this stage, and the repetition of this whole setup, although h6 slightly delayed, gets a pawn, sacks, goes very direct. Maybe going a little bit slower was stronger, possibly. He just does this, then takes. That could be stronger, possibly. But okay, goes very direct on these light squares. And what happened in the game was takes. He's still doing fine actually, but just going very direct. Check. Loses queen. In this position, yeah, knight c2 check is also interesting, because if you take, and take the rook, it's actually a big mistake to take this bishop with the queen, because knight f3 check comes and it's checkmate. Wherever you go, rook here is also checkmate. So you can't take with the queen, so you'd have to take with the king or do something else. But taking with the king isn't great either, apparently. So, but okay, bishop takes f1 came first, and so simply going for rook at h1 mate. Now in this position, white actually has mate. Bishop takes g7, king g8. Because if you take on g7, the problem is there's at f6, e takes f6, queen takes f6, knight takes f6, at h6, king h7, knight g5 comes. And obviously if you step back a knight here and a pawn here mate, so you have to take it. But then knight takes f7, double check, can't step up or queen here is mate, so we have to step down. However we step down, the queen is coming in, and it's taken g6, protecting this knight. And if we just move here, pawn here, 2 pawns will be mating. So let's try and resist. And resisting is no good either, because of knight here checkmate, or indeed knight here checkmate. Oh yeah, you can't go to the corner anyway. So white had a mate here with knight at f6. So sorry, after king, that's what happens after king takes bishop. So king g8 was played, and the key move here for white to mate is knight at f6, and you can't take this way, or queen here is checkmate, and you can't take this way either, because otherwise knight at e7, queen takes pawn, takes, pawn here, knight here, takes, queen comes in again, and that's checkmate, defended by the rook. And obviously if you take with the king instead of the knight, so king takes, then this is also mate. Well, this is the fancy mate. There's just a more obvious mate. The more obvious mate is bishop at e5, king takes e7, queen d6, king here, and pawn here, checkmate. Takes. But instead h7 was played, and now king takes g7 isn't mating, because black doesn't have diagonals. So you can take here, you don't have the diagonals. Queen takes pawn, knight takes f6. You could go pawn here, check. And if you take here, then you're getting mated, but you can actually just go king h8. and white is a diagonal short of checkmate. So it's kind of very frustrating for him. So instead he's just throwing away his pieces, trying to make something work, and nothing quite works. It's just trying to do some things, but there's no mate. And Blitz Bullet delivers mate in game 8. Game 9 was this again. Okay, so he draws the king out, takes, defends the d4 pawn, hits the queen, and he's hitting here, he's hitting the queen. He's also, there are also ideas like bishop takes knight, knight at f6, which are annoying. So takes the queen, drops the queen on, hitting the two weaknesses here and here. So white's doing very well. Doesn't even bother taking this pawn, just goes straight in for the attack. Bishop takes h6, sacks his queen for a rook, goes straight in. So very direct play as usual from Blitz Bullet. Just trying to deflect that rook. Check, he takes it, here, check, he takes it. And knight to g8, very pretty mate, he ends up finding check, knight here, check, pawn here, check, check, and knight takes bishop, checkmate. He didn't need the pawn here, just knight takes bishop, checkmate. Straight away was also mate. In fact, knight here, check, mate was also mate. Or in fact, knight g7 mate was also mate. So there are lots of different mates there. Or indeed, at g4 was also mate. So 4 different mates, but he went for a mate in 2 instead. So that was game 9. So 8-1 lead at this stage. And this was the final game. Sets up the fortress. Eyeing this weak diagonal. Sacks a piece for 2 pawns, a knight for 2 pawns. So solid position from black. Wins back a piece for 2 pawns. And then goes for this central push. Does it work? Queen takes c5, right? So if bishop takes queen, rook takes queen. So it looks good so far from black. But I think the move he missed was rook takes bishop here. The point is takes. Okay, you can do that intermezzo at some point. You're winning this knight. Or even nicer, you throw in a check and then win the knight. And this is just crushing. Checkmate. Very hard to see how to stop that. So, but instead he plays knight f6. Takes, queen takes, and suddenly the queen, queen is coming into an attack. So knight takes g6, and he loses a whole queen with this little maneuver, this discovery check, and loses a whole queen, but still black is actually doing fine, surprisingly. Takes here, doing fine until he played this move bishop at h3. The correct move apparently here was rook at f1. So if king takes g2, then that defends the rook, bringing the knight in. Rook takes, knight here check, and you eventually get mate. That's if you take g2. And if you don't take g2, if say you go rook f1, takes, then takes, you basically throw in these checks, and the most important piece you have to get rid of is this bishop. At the end of all the sequences, basically you have to get rid of that bishop. And you'll see why from what happened in the game. Because what happened in the game was he just check and bishop at h3, so threatening mate here and threatening mate here. So it looks, so indirectly threatening mate here. So it looks really strong. Like if white does nothing, there's rook at h1, and does rook at f1 also mate? Maybe not. Yeah, maybe that's not. So it's just threatening rook at a1. But what he missed is this bishop is actually lethal. And that's exact. And doganswer finds the mate in the game with queen takes g7, king takes. Queen here check blocks, and bishop takes knight. King takes h7 is forced. Knight at g5, brilliant move. Takes, takes. And if you step back, pawn here, rook takes, and queen takes is checkmate, so he has to step up. But knight takes rook now wins the rook with check. Bishop here, and rook here, checkmate. And it all came from this piece, this bishop. The queen looks like the threatening piece in this position, but it's actually the bishop. So even rook takes bishop is fine. Black's winning. He had to eliminate that bishop, and failing to do so, he had 2 minutes on the clock to figure it out. But just spent 2 minutes 20, he spent 17 seconds and went for this. And he didn't realize how dangerous this bishop was. Just had to do anything that respected the danger of that bishop, was probably this being the best. Just takes, check, takes, and then check here. And at some point eliminate the bishop. Just takes, check here, takes. So the point is, of course, he never wants to do this, because then knight g2 and he wins the rook for free. So that's why he's deflecting the knights and then takes the bishop for free, threatening mate and also protecting against his own mate idea by winning this bishop. So that would have been the way to finish that one. So unfortunate loss in game 10, but a good final score. Blitz Bullet winning against doganswer 8-2. So that provides a recap of the 3 matches which didn't get live coverage at the time, and for the rest of them which did get live coverage, I'd recommend you check out the streams of Ganesh and also the stream of Cabbage, and I'll just give you the links in the Twitch chat. And actually, if you just type streamers, that'll give you a list of all the Crazyhouse streamers, and if you type the appropriate commands, you'll be able to get their links and follow all the Crazyhouse streamers. Okay, that's probably it for today. And basically, after this stream, that means that every candidate's match so far has been covered.